For this video, we'll explore how to create our own custom backend and then integrate that with a custom GPT. We'll also cover environment variables, how to send parameters from a GPT, and then interpret those parameters in our API. Let's dive right in. We'll start by building the backend. I've gone ahead and created a directory called Test API. Feel free to name it whatever you'd like. We'll be using npms to start the project. If you don't know what that is, I will provide a link in the description. Okay, first we'll create a app.js file, which is basically our starting point in our server application. And we'll go ahead and initialize a project. You can just press enter, entry point app.js. If you haven't created app.js file before you do this, it will suggest index.js, which is fine. I just prefer app.js. This will provide us with a package.json file, which we need because now we will go ahead and install Express. You can see a package lock.json file appearing. And we'll try and import Express from Express. This kind of import statement won't work unless you go in your package.json file and put in type module. So let's initialize our app with Express. We'll use Express to parse our JSON in the body of the request. I'll get to that later. I will also set some headers. Let's just copy-paste because this is the boring part. This basically tells the app what it will allow, and I've gone ahead and put in different kinds of requests, but we'll probably just cover a simple GET request, and we'll put in a POST request as well. So you guys can see how you send the parameters in the body with a custom ChatGPT action. It's kind of tricky because the GPT expects you to put in an open API schema, which is not something everyone knows how to do. Let's set a port. We'll go ahead and use an environment port. We will be covering that later. I will teach you how to put in a simple authorization and bearer token. This tells the app that if you don't have an environment variable, or port is nothing. You'll set it to 3000. And then let's go ahead and set up a listener for our server. App is listening on ports. Okay, so there you have it. We'll try and start our app now. Node app.js. So we can see our app is listening on port 3000. Let's install a tool called NodeMon. Now we can go ahead and say NodeMon app.js. And you'll see if we do changes in our code and we save, it'll automatically start the server again. Okay, let's put in a simple GET request that we'll test in Postman. Okay, so let's go for localhost 3000 and put a slash at the end. And you'll see our response is hello world. Great. Let's try and connect this to our GPT. Let's create our custom GPT. For that, we'll go to Explore GPTs and click Create. Let's just call this a people finder. We'll just skip conversation starters, maybe create an image with DALL-E just to make it look nice. There you go. Now we will create a new action, and we'll start off with the weather example. And for this URL, we'll have to use some kind of tool since we are developing our backend locally and it's running on our local host. I like to use ngrok. I'm on the paid account since I tried the free one, but it didn't work out. It's using some kind of landing page. You have to set a header to bypass it, and as far as I know, the custom GPTs won't allow you to set custom headers. But there are other options, so you might find some free alternatives to ngrok. It's an easy setup. Since I have a paid account, I have to use a static domain. So let's paste that in there. This is trying to go for port 80, and we're on port 3000. So let's just change that. Here we have a URL, and we'll paste that in there. And this will redirect every traffic to that URL to our local host. You might want to be a bit more specific when you fill out the description, but let's just keep it simple for now. We'll go ahead and remove the parameters for this one. Let's just test if this works. We'll try and hit our /get request. That will return hello world. So let's see. Well, it's reacting to the fact that the answer doesn't provide any expected information about people, but it did return hello world, which was what we asked our backend to do. Okay, let's just change this. Person Michael, age 31. Go ahead and save and start our server app up again. Now let's give it another go. So here you can see the response provided information about a person named Michael, who is 31 years old. It's time to make this a little more complicated. Let's create a folder called routes, and there we'll create a file called person.js, which will import router from Express, and then we'll create a post routes. Now go ahead and create a controllers folder with a similar file called person.js. Let's export a function called findPerson, or was it persons? FindPerson. Now we need to test this with a person named Steve, who's 24 years old. We'll have to import that function. And also you'll have to remember to put the file extension. My autocomplete doesn't do it. We'll also have to import our routes and make sure the app uses it. Oh yeah, it's crashing because I forgot the extension. Okay, let's test this out with Postman. We'll have to get our URL. And it returns Michael, age 31. You see here there's a /person, and in our route there is a /findPerson, so our request has to be similar. And that's also a post request, and that returns Steve, age 24. Okay, so let's try and send a body of parameters to this endpoint from ChatGPT. We can go ahead and try it out first in Postman so we know it works. Let's go ahead and try that. Yeah, it initially said object, so let's try and print the person param. As you can see, the body is Steve. Now we have to implement this in our custom GPT and write an open API schema that allows us to send parameters in the request body. Let's write the schema in Visual Studio Code. I kind of prefer that so I can format the code. You can do it also in your custom GPT, but it will default to the YAML file type, which I'm not that fond of. Okay, we'll need another path. And let's just make sure we get it right. And that's a post request. We'll need a description and an operation ID, so let's just copy this. And now we'll implement a request body, which is required. And we'll also provide it with values, possible values. And we will call our persons for Michael and Steve. And I think that's it. Let's try it out. As you can see, it found information on an individual named Steve, who is 24 years old, which is, yeah, no, it's not weird. It sent a param named Michael. If you can see here, it's undefined, so let's try and figure that out. Yeah, it's because it uses the name variable. I think we maybe have person. Let's try it out now. Michael? So now you can do things like this. Let's try and test it. It retrieved information about Michael. And as you can see, the parameter was Michael, so it hit this else statement. In reality, you will do a lot more complex things than this, maybe look up in a database or make an API call, but this is just an example. You can also send in a number of parameters, like in an array, We'll try and show a quick example of that as well. You'll have the variable to be a name. We can send names. You make this an array, and that will have items which will have its own type. Let's try this. Yeah, I keep forgetting this. Okay, let's try now. We sent names, didn't we? Okay, let's try again. Seems to be something that's not working. It says undefined. Oh, getting sloppy here. Yeah, see, Michael and Steve. If you check the requests, it sent in Michael and Steve. Ignore the response here because it's not going to be correct, since our code logic doesn't match up with our parameters. I told you in the beginning that I was going to show you also how to authenticate. We're going to do a real simple version of that. First off, we need to create an environment file, something like that. We'll also install a package. There we go. This will check our authentication token at every address. Oh, we almost forgot something. Here we have declared an environment variable named auth token. We also have to declare that in our file. We'll make just a, let's call it a placeholder token for now. You obviously have to make this a bit more secure. Let's also say bearer. Let's also log the request just to be sure. API key 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We can try any one of these. Got an error. Yeah, it's not up and running. Let's try again. As you can see, these are our tokens, and it returned information about Michael, 31 years old. So there you have it. Please click subscribe to follow along on other programming tutorials in the future. Thanks for watching.